Today we're sitting down and we're talking about what you need to think about when you're looking at your first home. Today we're sitting down with Sam Osborne, who in full disclosure is my father, but we're sitting down with him for a very good reason. So why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about your background and your expertise and what you've been up to in terms of your career and profession.
Okay. Well, I've always kind of been interested in architecture and houses, having grown up in one that would be almost 200 years old right now in Indiana, southern Indiana, small town. And I came to Ohio to study architecture down at Miami University in Oxford. From there, I went to Atlanta after I married a girl from Ohio and worked for the Coca-Cola Company in their plant design department for about a year before I decided that I didn't want to be involved with corporate architecture. I wanted to be a young, starving architect, and I've achieved my goal, even though I'm old now. I went from there to one of the largest and most prestigious firms in Atlanta, then and still to this day, Thompson, Gillette and Steinbeck. Had a great experience with them. It was like a master's degree, and then went on from there to work in southern England and Brighton and tour Europe for about a year, seeing everything there was to see that we could get to in that year in the way of historic architecture. It seemed like a good idea to do that at the beginning of my profession instead of the end. Came back home, landed in a small firm back home in Atlanta. Liked the small firm, liked the dealing with the small homeowner, got involved with churches, designing churches, and I found that they and homes got me into working with the end user. And so you could try to capture the personality and the flavor of either the homeowner or the congregation of a church. It was just much more meaningful to design that. And I've been really involved with home designs and other related things for the last maybe 40 years.
Okay. So the reason, from my point of view, that we want to sit down with you today is that process of being a residential architect and designing from literally the ground up a home for someone involves asking particular questions and going through a process with a potential homeowner that can be directly applicable to someone looking for a home. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about what that process entails and the questions you ask and what you're thinking about as you begin to design a home for a family or an individual.
Okay. Well, many, many years ago, when I first started getting involved in residential design, I came across a book by a famous architect. And in the back of the book, he had a list of questions that you should ask somebody before you design a house. And I thought that was really good. So I decided to do that and then expand on it even more so. And over the years, I've worked on that and expanded it time and time again. In my latter years, I thought it would be fun to maybe help people buy a house, some friends and stuff, and give them a better service, especially with the advent of computers. There were a lot of people looking for houses online, and they were taking a lot of the work away from a realtor that they were supposed to be doing. They were doing it themselves. They were doing the search for the house that they thought they wanted. Plus, I didn't think that most of the people knew exactly what to be looking for. They didn't know what questions to ask themselves. And so I got into that with the idea that if I put the time up front asking questions from people, that it would take very little time to find the house, not necessarily find the house, but go looking at houses. And over my experience and my short and brief time as working in real estate, very seldom did we ever look at more than 5 houses before we found the house that we really wanted. That means we didn't go to visit them and walk through them.
It's sort of my general feeling, having gone through home buying a number of times and talking to other people who've done the process, that typically people seem to be looking at a general location, and then they sort of walk through a house and decide whether they like it. But like it can be very subjective. And you may like the aesthetic of a home, but it may not actually function for you. So can you walk us through maybe some of the questions that you're asking in that questionnaire and in that process of either designing or trying to find a home for someone, that may be beyond just, hey, does it have enough bedrooms or does it have a living room? Some of the maybe the lifestyle questions and some of the issues that people you're finding aren't thinking of themselves and need some help thinking through.
Well, I find people not really even thinking that very first thing you said or referred to is that real estate, everybody always just said, is all about location, location, location. And although when we came to Zanesville, we love this historic district that we're in here, but location is more than just it not being a nice historic district, which had a long time ago and is regaining the ambiance that it did have. It's, are you close to schools that your children may go to? Are you close to shopping? Are you close to entertainment? A number of things. Is it a convenient place to be for you? A commute to work or whatever? Now, you grew up in, and we lived in Atlanta for 48 years, and those are much bigger concerns than they are in a smaller town where everything's within about 5 minutes of each other. But that's kind of what I start with on people is location, location, location. But taking into things like that into account. The next thing is that the lot size. I mean, do you need a huge lot for kids to play in and things such as that? Do you want a flower garden? Do you want a vegetable garden? That means you're going to have a little bit more sun to grow vegetables. Do you like a lot of trees? Well, then those kind of conflict. But going through different items that make one lot better than another lot and asking people questions about that. My first sit down with people is about 3 hours long. Not everybody's going to want to do what I want to do with them. They don't want to invest that time. But gosh, this is the biggest investment you're probably going to make in your life. You may make it multiple times, but it takes a little bit more time than you would put into planning your vacation. And most people don't put that much time into it. And if you don't organize your thoughts to begin with, then you can't make an intelligent spur-of-the-moment decision, because if it is a seller's market, you're going to have to make a spur-of-the-moment decision because that house might be gone tomorrow.
Let's get into the house itself and what sort of questions we're asking as far as, and I'm thinking here more functionality of the house. Is it actually going to work for the way that the buyer or potential buyer lives their life?
What I go through is all the spaces that might be contained in a house for a person, and think like, how will this space function and who's going to use it? Let me just read these off. The location of that space or room and its relationship to other rooms and spaces. What materials and finishes would you like in that particular room to make it more functional and as pleasing as it can be for you? What furniture that you have or would like to have will you put in this room? And how many people might congregate in that room? How big of a dining room table are you going to need? And is that going to be on a day-to-day basis? Are you going to eat in the kitchen or a family room or a breakfast room or just the dining room? Is there anything special that might be in that room, like artwork? Do you have special artwork that you're going to have to put someplace in the house? So what type and how much storage is going to be needed, and how will that room be lighted? Do you want a lot of natural light? And then when you get to a kitchen, what appliances and fixtures do you want? Do you like to cook with gas? Do you like to cook with electric? Are you used to rinsing your dishes and going to the right to put your dishes in the dishwasher, or the left? And all of these questions are based on if I was going to design this for you. But what I try to do is get this written program down pat. So if we were going to design you a house, this is what we were designed for. But instead of designing it and building, let's go out and look for it.
I know as we were getting ready for this, one of the things we were talking about is some of the trends in both building, renovating, and buying. And I think we were talking in particular about open floor plans versus closed plans. Talk to us a little bit about what those different layouts facilitate in terms of a lifestyle, and why you would want one over the other, and what you've seen in terms of trends. Because I think that's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I see things kind of moving back in the larger market areas, which usually set the trend, whether that be in LA, Chicago, New York, Miami, whatever, even Atlanta. That the things are starting to move back to not having one large open entertainment space. I mean, that is great when you're consistently entertaining large groups of people. But when you want to sit down and feel cozy by the fire to watch a movie or something, sometimes that's not the best space to do that in. It just doesn't feel that comfortable. And so I find people that really would like sometimes designated spaces for different things. I like both of them myself. One of the trends that's gone away, and I think this is good, is you're walking into your two-story family room, which is, hard to clean all the windows. It's hard to heat. It's hard to air condition. And then you have your formal living room, and then you have your keeping room, and then you have a sitting room. I mean, you have all these multiple spaces. And I think you can get too many spaces where a large family gets segmented and people spend too much time alone instead of together. But a lot of that just depends upon the lifestyle of the individual people and how, what they really need.
And I think, sort of to summarize kind of what I've been hearing you say, is there are a lot of considerations to be made, and that you would do well to think about as you're buying or building, designing, and most people are finding these things out after the fact. I mean, a lot of people don't go through that process, and so they move into a house and they realize, oh, well, this doesn't work for me, and that doesn't really work for me. And I'm sure in some cases that can ruin a home for somebody. In a lot of cases, it just means that for whatever period you're going to be in this house, 5, 10, 15 years, perhaps the rest of your life, you're settling for a home that doesn't really function the way that it could for you.
Yeah, let me tell you a story. The house you grew up in, we went out to look at houses in the neighborhood where we rented one Sunday afternoon, rainy Sunday afternoon actually, and we looked only at 2 houses after we had lost the first one that we thought we wanted. In the end, we ended up with a much better house, but when we moved in, I thought this had a shower, and it just had a tub. The other house we looked at had the shower. And so without knowing exactly what we wanted in a bathroom, we got what we got. And we made do with it. But in the end, we added a second story to that house. It's when you've got a guide to take you through it, you can check things off.
So it's just not possible to sit here and have a conversation about every little minute question in detail, because one, it's a long questionnaire. Like you said, we don't have 3 hours to sit here and talk about it. But 2, everybody's answers are different.
Yes.
And there is, and I know you were saying this earlier, and there certainly is, being in your position or the realtor's or the architect's position, an art form to sort of sifting through that data and figuring out what does it mean, and then going to apply.
It takes me 15 hours to come up with a final.
Yeah. So we certainly don't have that time, and so we can't even try to do that. But I think we've talked a little bit about some of the ideas and concepts. But I know you were saying that you're going to be distilling that list into some of the larger or more general ideas. We will get with you and sort of summarize your list as best we can for those viewers who want to start to think about some of these questions as they're looking at homes. And as always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and we'll be sure to get back with my dad here, Sam, and I'm sure he's happy to share his expertise and his knowledge and kind of put you on the right path. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.